Hello and welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today, my co-host and musical collaborator is Matthew McDonald of Perpetual Groove, and his guest is Jonathan Lubecky. Hello, Matt. How you doing?
Hey, Jack. Nice to finally meet you.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I know we've had a few months going back and forth on this, so I appreciate your patience and willing to see it through.
Nice. It will be worth it.
Right, for sure, for sure. I'm excited about talking to Sergeant Lubecky next week.
Yeah. So you got a great setup there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, home. This is the computer that sits at the grand piano in the sunroom.
Right.
So I just leave all the mics and everything set up for when I need to run it. It's worked out great the last couple of years over the pandemic. So
You're a man. I could tell instantly you're a man who knows how to set up his nest.
yeah, definitely. Whether it's a man cave or a studio, whatever the case may be, I definitely like to make a nest at home for sure.
Because you're in the middle of tour at the moment, yeah?
Kind of, yeah. I'm touching base, and then I leave again on Tuesday for 2 weeks. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah. I've been checking out some of the videos and what a fun band to be in.
it is. I have a really, really great job that I've been doing a long time. I really enjoy it. So I'm thankful I still get to be doing it. We're 20 years in now. So,
Yeah. Because you had a bit of a hiatus there and
yeah, we took a little bit of a break for a minute, which I think is healthy for everyone to do. If we had to do it all over again, I think we'd probably just keep it to ourselves and take a couple of years off. But, when you have management and publicists, wanting to make everything an announce,
it's a
sometimes
machine,
sometimes the best decision might get a little clouded in the moment. So, but fortunately, we're all still here and doing it.
Yeah.
And
No.
you're a complete troubadour from everything I've read. You've been traveling and singing all over.
I had a stint at it, yeah, but I got
Yeah.
burnt out. Now I'm a hermit in here in
Yeah.
Italy.
Right.
And
What part of Italy are you in?
I'm in the south, about an hour and a half south of Napoli, yeah.
Nice. And
It's
are you from England originally? Is that correct?
I am, yeah. I'm originally from England, yeah.
Nice.
But
How long have you been in Italy now?
Well, it's been 10 years. My girlfriend brought me over as a souvenir after we've been traveling and brought me back, fed me up, fixed me up, and she's an architect, built me a house.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jackpot.
I know.
And how's the little one? You have a new little one, is that correct?
I do have a 10-month-old baby. Yeah.
Congrats, man. Congrats.
Thank you.
First child?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Changes everything, doesn't it?
How many of you?
I have 4 children. Yeah.
4. Wow.
So, yeah. Yeah. It's great though. It's a happy household that we have here. So.
How old are they?
It's a pretty big split. I have 2 older kids that are 26 and 24.
Oh, wow.
That are both actually, my son's over there in Europe right now. He's in the Air Force station in Ramstein.
Oh,
And,
really?
yeah, my eldest daughter is over here stateside in Florida. And then my wife and I, we just celebrated our 17-year wedding anniversary yesterday. And we have a 12 and 9-year-old. 12-year-old's going about 17 and 9-year-old's going on 20 from what I can tell. She's very, very, very mature for her age, for sure.
So do you notice the difference in the times, so to speak, of when you Yeah.
Hugely.
Yeah.
We're far more aware as parents now with our younger children with just the internet and social media, especially. I don't think my younger kids I don't think I'm going to let them put social media of any sorts on their phone probably till they're an actual adult. And with the older kids, when they were 13, 14, we didn't really understand social media yet. And so they had accounts and stuff like that. And boy, if I could do that over, I sure would, because I can't imagine all of my teen years being documented online forever. Boy, would there be some embarrassing stuff there. But yeah,
that's a really interesting social experiment. Yeah, you've done both like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So fortunately, the 9-year-old doesn't even have a phone yet. So the
Okay.
12-year-old, he got his when he was 11, but it's if he wants to do anything besides text his friends or make a phone call or play the games that are on it, it has to go through us. So
On a short leash. Yeah.
yeah, fortunately, Apple has made it really easy for parents to control the content on their iPhones. I think A lot of parents
Oh,
probably just need to spend a little more time educating themselves on how to. But
yeah, yeah. It's important you're aware. Yeah, I guess we're all learning on our feet. I mean, I didn't have an email account till I was, yeah, in my 20s. So,
same, same.
yeah.
I'm 48 now. And so, I grew up like right as high school was wrapping up, you really started to see more implementation of, the internet and things like that that were still pretty brand new. Everything was dialed. But, in college was when I really started like accessing the internet. So
Mm.
yeah, we grew up kind of analog still for us Gen Xers like myself. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, did you go in the army when you were young then? Is that?
I did. I did. I joined the army when I was 23, right as I was wrapping up school. And at the time they were paying for your college tuition or your loans essentially and everything. So I got to join as a musician. It was a really great experience. And when I met my wife there and everything,
Mhm.
she's a musician as well in the military. Um, so it was great. It was a good experience. I was only 4 years for me. That was enough, but it definitely bridged everything that I still do today.
Wow.
Overall, very positive experience. Sometimes, military music are a bit oil and water, but for the most part, it opened my eyes to a lot of good things that we do
Yeah.
that don't get the headlines.
If there's one job in the military I could pick to be, a musician would be
Yeah,
up
it
there.
was it was solid. It was a solid gig. It was a solid gig. You get advanced rank and everything because you have to know how to play before you go in and everything. So that they took pretty good care of us, man. I really enjoyed the experience.
So your guest that we've chosen to interview is Jonathan Lubecky, and he's a the Veterans and Governmental Affairs Liaison for MAPS,
Mm.
which is super interesting organization. I've been on um of checking out some of his videos. How did you come across him?
I think like a lot, the first time I became aware of Sergeant Lubecky and his story was in the documentary that was on Netflix, the How to Change Your Mind that they did with Michael Pollan. I think it came out in 2020. It might have been 2021, but kind of in that haze of the pandemic, sat there and watched all the episodes. I was familiar with Michael Pollan's book several years ago that came
Mhm.
out. It was just the book itself, when I picked it up, was very sciencey with all the, experiments that they were doing and a lot of the science talk behind it. So I thought the documentary was great because they were able to bring it to the masses that way, the
Mm.
message and the results without getting so into some of the stuff that might turn people off or, it would get confusing. I'd be reading and all of a sudden I'd realize I had no comprehension of the last 3 or 4 sentences I might have read. So, but yeah, like a lot, I think I saw him in that first in the MDMA episode and
Mm.
immediately connected, with the story as a veteran. Um, and, really the part that moved me or inspired me most in wanting to speak to him more was his point in the 22 suicides a day still, that it's been a long number for several years now, as far as veterans committing suicide every day.
Mm.
That's a shocking number, and unfortunately, I think it's hard for a lot of us who have served. I don't know any of my friends who don't know somebody who has
Wow.
taken their own life. So we have all these soldiers and different airmen and navy, all these folks going and doing exactly what we ask of them, and
Mm.
then when they get out of the military, there's not enough care to help them through the
Mm.
the PTSD that a
Yeah.
lot of people bring home from trauma. Affects everyone. um and I think Sergeant Lubecky, I've seen him say this in multiple interviews. The reason he's kind of taken the front is because, when a veteran tells you something that might go against what you've learned, especially when it comes to psychedelic research and stuff like that, and his experience, people tend to listen
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's an identifiable trauma, but trauma happens to all of us in different ways. So I've been really, the big three things I want to speak to him most about is obviously where we're at currently as far as daily suicides, if that number has changed, and his work and thoughts on that. Obviously, an update as to what's gone on with MAPS and his lobbying efforts in DC and where all those bills are. I'm fascinated. From what I understand, he was pretty good at getting AOC and Matt Gaetz to sponsor a bill together, to work together. So, I'm thoroughly fascinated by how that's all coming on. And of course, the more recent stuff he's been doing in Kyiv and, humanitarian efforts with the war in
Yeah.
Ukraine.
Yeah, we've
So
got in between sorties to the Ukraine now. And
yeah, and so many of the stuff he was doing a few years ago was just strictly like a lot of the podcasts I saw he was doing was strictly based on maps and his work with that and his
mm,
experience with the therapy. So I really want to see where he's at today,
yeah,
because it
yeah,
seems like a lot has changed. And yeah, like I said, man, I'm real excited that you
yeah.
presented the opportunity for me to speak with him. So
Well, no, I'm delighted.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we haven't had Michael Pollan on yet, but we've had Rick Doblin on, the
mhm,
founder of Maps, and that was super interesting. And but it
it
was
was
from yeah, it was not it was more of a journalistic approach. It wasn't you as a veteran
right.
speak the same language. This is the beautiful thing. I can just step back now. I'm chatting to you, but
Mhm,
if Jonathan comes on the show and chats to me, it's
mhm.
just going to be another interview like we've seen him on before. But with you guys are going to have just such a deep level of connection, and I'm really going to get a lot more from listening to it from that
Yeah, I'm
piece.
excited. And I mean, I know it's not how you've usually done the format of the podcast, but I'm excited that it is going to work out for face to face for John and I.
Yeah,
Because I think that those can be, reading body language in a discussion is such a thing. So I feel like we're
yeah,
going to have a bit of a more honest discussion, maybe. So I'm excited
yeah,
about it. It's really great that he's willing to come down to where I'm at uh, next Saturday in DC and do it
yeah.
there.
So
Yeah.
after a show, is he come and see the show as well?
I hope so. He's
Yeah,
more than welcome to stick around. All the rest of the guys in the band, when I told them that this is how this was panning out, because I've been obviously with the song and
yeah,
everything,
yeah.
I've been keeping the guys posted and everything where we were at. And everyone's very excited to meet him. And I think honestly we'll get a better tune out of it.
Of course, because the guys, really would want this band to play the whole, to do everything and
Yeah.
to play on it, and because you've just got such an amazing lineup there. I mean, you do such. What genre is it? It's
They call us a jam band, which
a
I'm
jam.
okay with. I used to
Yeah,
kind of,
that's a bit
be
limiting
like,
though. That's a
feels like it sometimes, but I felt that way pretty strongly 15 years ago. Like,
mm,
yes, we jam, especially in the live show. We take risks. We don't do the same set every night. There's a lot of the same elements
yeah,
that exist there. But, we've also always been more focused on the songwriting than the
yeah,
jamming, especially
yeah,
for the albums, obviously.
yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm pretty comfortable with jam band at this point. I think everybody loves the Dead now, and Fish is a real popular band for a long time over here.
Mm,
So like, I'll take it. I love the scene. I know
mhm.
that when we
And
go
the
do these
freedom,
best,
yeah.
exactly, when we go do these festivals, the audience wants us to take the risk. They want us to maybe fall apart, while we're trying something new, which I can't think of a lot of other audiences that will give you that kind of liberty and freedom where they actually want you to take the risk and everything. So many people go to a show, which is fine to be entertained, to see a
Mhm.
performance, which is totally great. And I've seen a lot of awesome performances from bands that I really love, but what we do is definitely in that world of a symbiotic relationship with the audience,
Mm.
pushing each other, to drive the music in different directions, which is always
Yeah,
fun.
and a completely different tour experience because, I've been on tour, you're on repeat, you're playing the same set, you get
Right.
into a groove, a perpetual groove,
Mhm.
uh, but you're improving, you're upping the game, you're saying, "Let's do this, remember that," and you're just all this stuff's going on, so must be amazing.
Yeah, and we're real careful. Like night to night, there's no repeats, even though we might be in different towns and markets and everything like that. We know that there's a pretty rabid fan base that's keeping an eye to make sure that we're not playing the same show every
You're
night and everything.
joking, wow.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. That also allows us though to, record every show and we put it up on nugs.net and on our Bandcamp
Ah,
page. And
ah,
so it's nice because we have subscribers that want to hear, they might want to hear the same song from 5 different shows because each version is very different from the other.
bands like that should be dipped in gold, no?
They should. They should. We're very appreciative. They've been really patient with us over the years too. So very appreciative to be able to do it with the fan base that we have still.
But you also I saw you doing diverse things like a Wu-Tang cover?
Yeah, no, we throw fun covers in for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was crazy.
yeah. No, we like to throw it all in there in the mix. We have
Talking
songs that are,
Heads, yeah.
yeah, a couple Talking Heads. So I think Night Melody's the one that we're probably most known for that cover.
That's beautiful, yeah.
But just little shifts that I play more of a guitar thing on that. And the guitar player takes what is the synth lead, in the original recording that Bernie Worrell was playing, which,
Mm,
just kind of happened one night. The first time we tried, I was like, sure, go for it. So it stayed that way. So little
yeah,
changes like that, that's what's so great about songs, is that you
yeah,
can interpret it, that fits your band sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. No, it'd be great if all the guys could work on it. If they, if they meet Jonathan as well, like you say, then there'll be more, because that's, we're doing a song for him because he deserves a song, with his
Absolutely.
work, to,
Mhm.
so yeah, that would really come across, really make a much, I wish everyone would go to meet everyone, but unfortunately it
Right.
doesn't usually work like that. We usually at a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Yeah. But it's such a cool concept. It took me, after you sent me the example of the Rick Doblin interview, I was like, oh wow, it's quite a bit to bite off too. You've got a
Yeah.
lot of organizing on your side to do it. So bravo, man. Cheers
Thank you.
to that, man. That's a lot of work. So
Well, it's setting up the interviews, which takes the most time. Doing the songs
yeah.
is the easiest part, It's a lot setting up. So also when you go there, will you could you take a mic to record some good sound in the room?
Yeah, I'm planning on bringing this setup with another mic so both of
Okay.
us can just set up the video. So hopefully both of us are in shot there,
Okay.
obviously. And then I'm going to just use what I'm using here right now with another mic. So
Okay.
yeah,
Brilliant.
definitely want to get you a good sound and recording, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I won't be asking too many questions. I'll just be kind of in the room, but it'd be great if I could be there to, if you
Yeah.
could put me on the laptop as a,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that should be an issue at all. We're playing at the Hamilton in
okay.
Washington, D.C. It's like 2 blocks from the White House. It's right downtown there. So
Seriously.
I can't imagine that they don't have, Wi-Fi set up that's
Yeah,
strong
you
enough.
could get on the White House Wi-Fi if you know the password.
There we go. Yeah,
You
I'll
must
get
have a
the
powerful
password.
signal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They're net.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, really? Right downtown there. Yeah.
Yeah, right downtown. I've played the room a couple times. It's beautiful, beautiful place. I love it. They have a grand piano in house, so that's always a nice treat to walk into a room that has that set up for you. So,
Yeah, and what time do you do it? Have you set it up? You're just gonna
no, I think we're gonna shoot for right after our sound check. So I'm waiting on my tour manager to get me those details, and then I was gonna hit our email chain we have going.
okay, great. That's the best
Yeah,
way to do it. Yeah, let's
yeah,
do that.
yeah.
Sweet. Well, it's just you're so it's gonna go so smoothly now because I know you put so much work into it already, and yeah, just make a great song afterwards. It's gonna be a real
Let's do it,
pleasure as
man.
well.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
everyone's excited about that for sure.
yeah, and spread the word about his wonderful work. So
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, excellent.
All right, mate. Well, unless there's anything else you think we should cover before,
I think we got it, man. Like I
yeah,
said, it's nice to finally meet you with all these emails. I apologize for some of them slipping through the cracks here and there, but
no worries.
I'm sure you can understand the life of a touring musician.
I
So
can, and a father of four.
very busy all the time.
Respect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
Back at you, man.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks, Jack. We'll stay in touch, man.
All right, Matt. See you in a moment.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks,
Take
man.
care. Bye
You
bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Hello, Matt.
Hey, what's up, Jack? How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great.
Can you hear me good here?
I hear you
This
loud and
way.
clear. Yeah.
Okay. And how about over here?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give the cans to John right here. It's John.
Hey.
Unfortunately, the mixer I brought isn't working properly. So he's going to have cans on to be able to hear you.
Okay. Great.
Thanks, Jack. There you go. Howdy, howdy. How's it going?
Hey, John, in the green room,
Yeah, I love it.
backstage.
Backstage all access pass.
Yeah. We haven't done one of these in a dressing room before.
Hey, I've done a lot of weird shit in a lot of weird places, so nothing surprises me anymore. Like, there was one time we had this big event up in New York City, and they had to get like 10 different Airbnbs to house everybody, right? 9 out of the 10 Airbnbs were totally amazing. One of them turned out to be a crack house. It was hilarious. Like, I go to take a nap, because I had a break in the day. And I mean, it's a big, psychedelics conference, so everybody's up late. I wake up and they're like, hey, we got something that'll really wake you up. They pull out a crack pipe. My buddy's like, you want to go get some coffee? I'm like, yeah. They're like, this will wake you up better. I'm like, no, I'm kind of good on this. and then they stole his shoes. So like the
If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen to you. And I've all the 1 in 10.
oh, dude, working in drug policy, there's so many bonkers stories. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it's good for podcasts though.
Oh, it's fantastic. This is why, like, every time I do a podcast, I have new stuff, new material to talk about.
It's like being a stand-up comedian. You just do all these crazy stuff, so you got things to talk about.
Oh, and what's funny is sometimes I'll do shit because it is funny, so I have a story later, and other times it just happens. I'm like, this is just bonkers.
Well, thanks so much for agreeing to chat to us. I mean, we've been really excited for this interview. We had, such a fun time. I've already chatted to Matt to prepare, and he's ready to chat away to you. So, yeah.
Sweet. We ready?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. I can watch you mime for me from where I'm sitting right now. Great. So pleasure to meet you, John.
Nice to meet
Thank you so
you.
much for doing this. Obviously, like so many people on the How to Change Your Mind documentary that came out over the pandemic. Myself, my wife is also that, we saw this, we had similar experiences outside of yours post-war, but that we found healing as well. So to see somebody put a face to it in the right atmosphere and with the right trials and, put it up front in a way that the public can digest a little bit more.
Well, and also I'll tell you, this isn't a silver bullet. It doesn't work for everyone. You look at the phase 3 trials, the first phase 3 trial, you had about 12% of people that it just nothing. It didn't work for them. And then you have other people who went into full remission, and then you had some people who had, reduction in symptoms but weren't in full remission yet. And the second half of phase 3, I personally don't know the numbers, but we're seeing a similar thing. There's a small portion that just it doesn't work, and this is where one of the things I talk about a lot is, a lot of my focus is on MDMA, but there's also ibogaine and psilocybin and 5-MeO and all these things. But also there's Zoloft and there's hot yoga.
Right.
And PTSD is a spectrum. And I think one of the big disservices that society has is we have an idea of what PTSD is, and we think it's the same for everyone. Right. And so I know people who have, PTSD, and they're fortunate. They don't have nightmares. They have other stuff. And some people, they don't have any problems with hypervigilance or anything, but they can't sleep more than an hour without nightmares, waking up in cold sweats. So because you have this spectrum of mild to severe, for some people, going to the gym, going to the church and talking to a pastor is all they need. For some people, it's meditation and yoga, and others, for some people, a Zoloft a day keeps the doctor away. We need to have every option on the table to address this issue, because every person is different and every person needs a different solution.
And I've heard you mention in the past that your trauma is easier maybe for Congress and the folks that you're working with to identify. And it's an easy place to put it. But that trauma happens to everyone and it affects every individual differently. So,
well, and this is where it gets interesting. Because I'm in media and I do podcasts, and, Netflix and John Oliver were huge, where I had a lot of people suffering reach out to me for help, or just to say, hey, thanks for saying what you said, and I'll be honest, one of the things I personally have a hard time handling is the number of people who reach out and are like, and tell me I was going to kill myself last night. And then I saw an interview and I decided not to.
Do you mind if we talk a little bit about your personal experience? Because there's an interview that you did in 2018 at CPAC that was not one of your longest ones, but was, to me, just fascinating. At the time, you had said that it was kind of extreme, I guess, but, you were lobbying for essentially.
Okay.
Do you still get that in the sense of,
yeah. So it does.
Can I just check that Matt's mic was working? Are you recording locally? Will your mic go into the?
Hold on.
Sorry, Joe.
He's asking
I don't
technical
hear
questions.
I don't hear you so well on that. Oh yeah, that's
how's
much
this?
different. Yeah.
Better. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll eat the mic.
yeah,
My bad.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Good.
Yes.
No. if it was something like, hey, turn a little to the left, that I could relay. When you start talking about like technical shit, I'm like, okay, this is out of my wheelhouse.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I know I threw two questions at you there, kind of, but
I forgot what they were.
It's all good. It's all good. The most important one in 2018, you were speaking.
Oh, whether it's extreme or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are getting a lot more Republicans on board. I'll be honest. One of the issues that we have is there are people who are in this to end the drug war, and there's people in this for medical.
Right.
And when you intermingle those two, it causes a lot of problems. You know, the drug policy movement talks a lot about and puts a lot of blame on Richard Nixon, and he rightfully earned it. But they also forget there was a reason he did that, which was there were people doing these things. There were negative outcomes. You had some cults pop up, and you also had, these people would go do mushrooms and then go try to plot to overthrow the government. And so when you keep, John Oliver, I keep going back because that was a great segment. And one of the things
I was happy to see it at the beginning of the season too. So
the biggest and best part about that show was when he said, we messed it up before and we can absolutely mess it up again. And this is where when people want to like jump ahead, there's a process here. And it sucks because, you have friends you've lost. I have friends I've lost. And I know every day that this isn't approved and available, people are dying. But I also know that the only way that the guys in my unit and veterans around this country will ever have access is if this is FDA approved and done through the VA, because that's where most veterans get their medical treatment.
my dad still goes to the VA hospital, goes straight to Vietnam. Still
in retirees covered by TRICARE. And the problem is when you look at the other methods that people are doing around the country, that won't lead to FDA approval and stuff like this, veterans won't have access because they can't afford it. They're on a fixed income, especially if you have severe PTSD, you're probably not working. You have a fixed income. You've got just enough to pay your bills. And then they're like, hey, you can go spend 10 grand to do an ayahuasca retreat. And that's not access. And the problem is the way they're doing it in the States, in my opinion, will give access to the people who are already doing it and to wealthy individuals. And the people who are truly suffering from PTSD, they're on Medicare and Medicaid, they've got health insurance and all of this, and they're going to be left out in the cold unless this is FDA approved. Now, back to how extreme it is, like there is a stigma still.
I guess what I was really referring to, I know that James Sessions had made it difficult for doctors to grow their own cannabis, right?
Correct.
Has something like that shifted under Garland, or is it still?
So one, it wasn't just Sessions.
Right. Like I said, I was referring to previous podcasts where
Right. No. And here's the thing, like, yeah, Jeff Sessions did do that. So did Eric Holder. And like, we can hit every attorney general going back for a few decades.
all the way back. Right.
Now, here's the interesting thing where psychedelics are different than cannabis. So cannabis, in order to manufacture, whether that's grow or like making a lab, a Schedule I narcotic for research purposes, you have to get a license from the DEA. And there's all sorts of requirements on that. So with cannabis, they issued one license to the National Institutes of Drug Abuse, which then contracted with the University of Mississippi to grow all the cannabis for federal research. And it was oral cannabis. Like my kid probably could have gotten better shake in middle school. And that was actually one of the issues with the cannabis phase 2 trial, was the weed was crap. Okay, I got a quick question. Can I swear on this or not?
Oh, yes.
Okay, just ask. We encourage. Okay. But the weed was complete shit.
Yeah.
And so through a concerted effort of a lot of people, and it's one of the things I worked on, especially like back in 2018 and stuff like this, was ending the NIDA monopoly, which would have allowed, and it has now ended. They have issued multiple licenses. I believe there's 5 to 10 licenses that have been issued.
That's progress.
And so that was fixed. Now that has never existed for psychedelics.
Right.
So, for example, MAP started their MDMA trial, the, like 20 years ago, I think was the first dose.
Right.
Somebody can fact check me on that one, but it was, I know I did it in 2014,
Right.
when cannabis was still illegal to research. So with psychedelic, I think part of the government's philosophy behind this was, it's not worth the fight because this won't work. And then holy shit, it does.
Right.
And I think part of the reason they block research into cannabis is they knew it would work. And so to prevent it, so they prevented that evidence from being shown. Whereas with psychedelics, they didn't really think it would work. So therefore they believed if they allowed the trials to go forward, that it would prove that this is, bad stuff and et cetera, et cetera. And instead they gave a breakthrough therapy designation, and then everybody's like, well, damn.
Right.
So, but it's interesting. You actually have a lot of Democrats who are against this or nervous about it, at least.
Right.
And you have a lot of Republicans same way, but we also have a lot of Republicans, and Democrats who've come together. And I'm not necessarily talking like AOC or Earl, Blumenauer, two very wonderful people, regardless of whether you agree with their politics. They're very nice people. That's not who's leading us in Congress. It's people like Lou Correa, California, who's not a radical.
Right.
I don't think anybody would call Lou Correa a radical. And Jack Bergman, who's a Michigan congressman, Republican, retired Marine Corps 3-star general. And you have people like Dan Crenshaw. Right. You also have some kind of interesting people on the right supporting it, like Matt Gaetz.
Right.
And so, like Matt Gaetz and AOC coming out and supporting this is about the most Matt Gaetz and AOC thing you could do.
Sure.
And this is where having people like Congressman Crenshaw and Congressman Bergman and Congressman Correa come.
I think it goes back to you also helping be the face, is that these veterans carry more weight publicly.
We do. I'm very fortunate as a veteran. I can send an email, a blind email to any congressional office and say 100% disabled combat veteran appointment request, and I get an appointment.
Right.
Now, who I get the appointment with, it could be like an intern out in the hallway, and that tells me the office's opinion on this, or, I'll meet with comms or LD, or I meet with a lot of health LAs and stuff like that to talk about this. And one of the big things that I have to get them past is that this isn't what you think. This isn't, hey, here's a bot. So, and it's interesting because a lot of this is, well, this is like going to raves and stuff. And I'm like, no, this is like therapeutic to specially trained therapists.
Right.
But also it's because going back to cannabis, if you they're worried that, like, you look at California, you can be 18 and say, hey, when I talk to girls, I get a little nervous. And they're like, here's your weed card. You can smoke as much as you want, wherever you want, whenever you want,
right,
for the rest of your life. And there's concern that that's what psychedelic assisted therapy is. And once they realize that it's far closer to other medical procedures, honestly, like a broken bone or a colonoscopy,
right.
One of the things I say all the time is, for me, like, the idea of doing MDMA recreationally is kind of weird.
Sure.
Like, I get why people do it. I'm not stupid.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, because that experience is so wrapped up in all my trauma,
right,
and healing from it and going through it and processing it, it's a lot more like anesthesia. Because the therapy is what actually fixed it. It wasn't the MDMA. The MDMA.
That you said that, and you mentioned it earlier, that it's not a magic bullet, any of that, psilocybin, MDMA, any of that, but that it will help the brain maybe open up new gateways that will allow you to heal. But you still do that work, and I think it's important that people realize, like, the work is still on the individual. This is just, well, in some cases, the magic tool that helps you get to the place to do.
But it has to be done with people who know what they're doing. And I'll be honest, one of my biggest fears in, always doing a lot of podcasts, being in media and talking about this, is that there's a veteran out there right now who hears my story and says, all I have to do is take MDMA.
Sure.
And they're at a party and somebody says, hey, do you want some? Well, and then it's laced with fentanyl or meth,
right,
or, this is a pharmaceutical product. Nobody goes to CVS and buys Advil thinking it's laced with fentanyl.
Exactly.
And that's because Advil's manufactured to a standard called GMP, good manufacturing practices. And these things need to be manufactured in the exact same way. Otherwise, that person will go to a party or a rave. They'll take it. It could have God knows what in it. And they're not doing it in a therapeutic environment. They don't have the therapist because all the MDMA does, which is the mind, body, and spirit place it needs to be for the therapy to actually work. And so it is very akin to anesthesia for various things. And like, I don't know anybody who the day after a colonoscopy says, hey, that anesthesia was great. I'm going to schedule another one.
Right.
And so, but my big fear is that somebody's going to say, hey, all I got to do is take a pill and I'll be fixed. And that's not what this is.
Yeah. And I think it ties into American society as a whole is looking for the cure instead of maybe looking for assistance to help yourself, heal in a sense. Speaking of the word cure, you have used that word in the past and used it in tying with pharmaceutical companies being afraid of some of these drugs and therapies because of the word cure being tossed.
So I've used the word cure for myself personally.
Right.
That's how I define my deal.
I guess my point in bringing that up is only like the fact that anyone uses that word.
I don't,
because you're not the only one.
So part of it is because this is going, and this is where going through the FDA model it is the right way to do this because the pharmaceutical companies can't attack the FDA model because then they undermine your own ability to approve drugs.
Right.
And if you just pass things legislatively, that without the science, without the trials, without going through the process, well, then they can attack and undermine. But also, frankly, they know how much Zoloft they sell in a year. And they know that one of the biggest bottlenecks is enough trained therapists. It's going to take decades to treat everyone.
Right.
I mean, I think I heard a number, we need 25,000 new trained therapists.
Right.
In 5 years just to come close to meeting demand. But also going back to one of the questions you asked, it is easier as a vet, in part because, and this is one of the really interesting things. You have vets and how they view their own mental health, and then you have everybody else. Right? Vets are very afraid to say, I have PTSD. They're very afraid to seek help. They don't want to talk about it, but their trauma is socially acceptable. They can go sit down with a congressman and say, I could sit down with any congressman and say, spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, 8 years in the Army. I deployed to Iraq 0506. I came back with PTSD. And they just nod their head. It's fully understood. It's a lot harder if you're talking about somebody who, was sexually molested as a child, right? One, they may not want to go on the media. They may not want to go tell a congressman because their family may not even know yet.
Right. They might not want to tell anyone.
Exactly.
Spending a whole lifetime not telling yourself, I think, is a big part of that too. So yeah, it's incredibly brave of you. And I think that,
well, it's not just me. There's a lot of other amazing veterans in the space.
Yeah. It's like
Jesse Gould, Marcus Capone. Jesse Gould runs Heroic Project,
okay,
and
gotcha.
Marcus and Amber Capone run Veterans One Treatment Solutions.
I've been happy to see so many veterans speaking out in a really great, well-spoken public manner. Like you said, it's something that the public accepts too.
Right.
That's the kind of trauma that oh, well, this war happened, whatever, and the big umbrella that covers. So, his trauma is identifiable.
Well, and the good thing is, like, let's take, Marcus Capone. He's a tier 1 operator, Navy SEAL, and he's been able to, and he's come out publicly and said, hey, I had problems. And so you see this person who in media and in politics and in everything, it's Navy SEALs are indestructible. Then you have a Navy SEAL come out and say, hey, I have a problem. That allows other people who aren't Navy SEALs to say, well, okay, if this strong guy, this going and seeking help isn't weakness, if he can do it. Most of our living Medal of Honor recipients suffer from crippling PTSD because of the event that earned them the Medal of Honor. Some of them have come forward and talked about it, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Dakota Meyer has talked about using psychedelic assisted therapy.
Right.
asking for help isn't weakness, and having strong people who society views as strong coming out.
Right.
It makes it easier. But it's also interesting how many people have told me point blank that they don't have PTSD because that's just for soldiers who go to war. And then I'll ask them, well, okay, tell me about your trauma. And then they'll tell me, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's 1,000 times worse than anything I saw in Iraq.
Right.
They're like, yeah, but you went to war and I did it. And I'm like, that doesn't change your trauma. And one of the other things, especially within the veteran, but in general, we need to stop comparing trauma, because the trauma that was the worst thing in your life is the worst thing in your life.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what that is. The worst thing in my life may be different. It doesn't matter. There is no comparison.
Right.
And, the other thing, especially with Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, a lot of these bases got bombed, and you've got the guy in finance who got mortared every day, who has PTSD, and he goes home and they're like, you never left the wire. How do you have PTSD?
Right.
You work in finance. What did you do? And I actually see that as a form of stolen valor, because you're stealing that person's problems and saying they're not real when they live with them each and every day.
Yep. I was in Bosnia from 99 to 2000 at Eagle Base in Tuzla, and was very fortunate. I was part of the NATO S4 mission. I was a musician in the military stationed down in Fort Stewart. So when we were deployed, we were still, part of the QRF at Eagle Base and everything. But for the most part, we were playing to other NATO troops, the Russians, Turkish bases, and going all over and doing that. And my trauma was never combat related or anything like that. It was a healing, wonderful thing at a humanitarian level, which I want to talk more about what you're doing there, working with these orphans that had been, orphaned from the war, and going to their schools, playing for that, having the one-on-one interaction. But when I came home, there was still stuff I carried home with me. It took a minute to figure out that I didn't realize that it wasn't, from a mortar going off or from bullets flying by my head or anything like that.
Well, and that's one of the things I addressed Vietnam Veterans of America Committee on PTSD yesterday. And one of the things that I notice over and over, and it's kind of interesting, it's usually when civilians talk about veterans, they use combat PTSD and veteran PTSD synonymously. And so one of the interesting things is, yes, veterans can suffer from combat PTSD. I'm not saying no to that, but also so do war correspondents, so do humanitarian relief workers, so do people who live in those war-torn areas. That's all combat PTSD. Plus, you have people who serve, who suffer, not just who may have combat PTSD, or they may have PTSD from military sexual trauma, from a training incident, from humanitarian relief efforts, or let's be honest, a lot of the people who join the military they had suffered early childhood trauma, which is why they go to the military and leave home for years at a time and are perfectly okay with that.
Right.
And so this is where the PTSD suffered by veterans is a large swath of causes. And when you pigeonhole everything to combat PTSD, well, then, that male veteran who was sexually assaulted in a hazing incident, who has PTSD, feels they can't come forward because they didn't get it from combat. They got it from something that's embarrassing, et cetera. And so this is where people like myself and Marcus and other veterans in the space, we view it as our duty to step forward. And it's not easy. It does take a very heavy emotional toll to do all that.
Finally, on the veteran front,
Yeah.
I know the number for a while has been 22 suicides a day. Is there any recent data that shows that might have started to tick down?
That's the hardest question to answer. And it's because, 22 a day was the statistic for a very long time.
Right, as long as I can remember it.
This VA number now, I believe, is 17. There's also studies that show as high as 44. I think the true answer is we don't know the real number.
Right.
Here is one number I do know. Over 130 people in this country every day, including veterans, commit suicide. That is a number we do that. And
It's
that
too high a
also,
number.
but that also is a low number because a lot of times, so one, you have medical examiners, law enforcement, people who investigate deaths, who a lot of times will call it an accidental death when it wasn't exactly accidental. A lot of times, self-inflicted only comes if there's a letter or it's conclusive. Otherwise, they label it as something else. Then it doesn't dump into that. And this is why, honestly, you'll rarely hear me talk about it over the past few years and give a number.
Right.
Because
we just don't know.
Well, because the number doesn't matter. You know what does matter? Guy in my unit, repassed 6 months ago, killed himself. These people, 22 a day is a number. Every one of those people has a name and a family and people left behind. Right. And this is where, with the permission of families, I believe rather than talking about a statistic, we should be talking about, a name, a family, a story. Because when you say 22, it goes in one ear and out the other. When you say a name, like we were just talking about numbers, and I could tell you're getting a little bit emotional as we're sitting here because I'm talking about a name and giving a story. And that's how you can make a connection, because it's really easy to ignore statistics.
Yeah.
But it's also, it's also been interesting because a lot of veterans are like, hey, I want to do drugs. So it's funny how many people I know who have PTSD who won't admit it to themselves, who are like, I totally want to do MDMA. I'll do that. I'm like, whatever gets you into therapy, man. I really don't care what it is, but
it goes back to, I guess, how do we toe that line between the recreational availability to folks and the medical use being available without Timothy Learying it again, having somebody that makes such a bad reputation that the government acts against it again.
Well, and part of the problem, honestly, with psychedelics is when there's bad outcomes, they're really bad and they typically make headlines. I saw a headline I think on CNN or Politico just the other day. People went into the mountains and did mushrooms and got lost and they had to send out a rescue party. Well, that was on CNN. Okay. How many people did mushrooms and didn't go get lost and have to have a rescue party? But they don't think like that. It's only what people see in the papers. And this is where there's so many trust issues involved in this. I mean, PTSD in and of itself is part trust issue.
Sure.
But growing up, I didn't trust therapists because I had a therapist breach confidentiality with my abuser.
Right.
When you're in the military, nobody goes and talks to the shrink because nobody trusts the shrink.
Well, I don't know now, but I know in 98, didn't want to risk all of a sudden you're not in the military anymore.
And this is where I hope that the DOD will eventually allow this as a treatment amongst active duty. Because for one, I would much rather see people healed when trauma happens than have to sit there and decide, do I get out or do I stay another 4 years and try to stick it out so I can retire and get my retirement check? You've got, but also if they're healed on active duty, they don't have to go to the VA. Right. And that would lower pressure on the VA. This is why I was actually really happy that, Representative Crenshaw, I believe Luttrell, quite a few people, but also Ro Khanna, an anti-war progressive, joined with Dan Crenshaw to require the National Institutes of Health to allow active duty participation in psychedelic trials. Wow. So it does make for a lot of really interesting bedfellows, but those statements being made are important.
I think so. A new military that continues to evolve reflects the country as well. My son, who's 24, is currently in Ramstein. He's in the Air Force for combat communications and everything like that. So, we have an active duty military member in the house. We keep an eye on all these things. That, my wife was not only in Bosnia with me, but she was also at the first part of Iraq in the early 2000s. And, we have a little bit of experience in what coming home feels like. And, so we keep an eye on all the signs with him. But fortunately, right now, it seems like they're letting grow out some mustaches farther and all sorts of stuff. They're loosening up the regulations on. in a good way. Let's real quick talk about. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's actually a really interesting segue with your son being stationed in Ramstein, because when I go back and forth to Ukraine, frequently I get on what's known as the rotator from Baltimore to Ramstein, and so been to Ramstein quite a few times, both in and out of Eastern Europe.
My dad's disabled vet, so growing up, we were eligible for MAX flights and hops and everything. So we'd always hop out of Dover, Delaware, and to Ramstein. My uncle was stationed in Wiesbaden at the time, so we'd stay with him, do Europe that way. It was amazing because it was a public school teacher, and my dad was a Christian education director, and so to be able to take family to Europe with
the most expensive, the most expensive part of like traveling to Europe is the airfare,
right?
Like especially when okay, if you're talking one person, okay, like it's grand for me to fly from Dulles to Warsaw. That's not bad. Okay, when you're talking about you, your wife, and 3 kids, well, that starts to add up
quickly.
Now, the nice thing is in Eastern Europe, things are very inexpensive because of the exchange rates and things like that.
Yeah.
Which is helpful.
Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing since the war in Ukraine started.
Yeah. So last year I went to Eastern Europe to help refugees and Ukrainians 3 times. Doing more and more each time, honestly. And I'm actually about to go back here on the 28th. And interestingly enough, this time I'll be speaking at a psychedelic convention in Kyiv.
Interesting.
And then I will go down east near the lines and check out my warehouse and do some humanitarian aid work and logistics down there. It started. So I lost my mom December 1st, 2020. And then I lost my dad October 6th, 2021. And my condolences. But my dad was 100% Polish, always wanted to go to Poland and never did. And so when he died, I made a promise that I was going to go within a year because I wanted to see it. And he always thought there'd be another day, and there wasn't. And I know how many days there shouldn't have been another day for me.
You said October of 21 he passed?
Yeah.
And the war started in February of 22, correct?
Correct. So right after the war started, got a call from a friend of mine here in DC, Adam Eidinger, and he's like, "Hey man, do you want to go to Moldova and help refugees?" I'm like, "Cool. Do I pack right now? Or like, do I have some time?" Right. He's like, no, we're leaving in like a week and a half. And I'm like, cool. So we went over and it was 10 people went over, 8 people stayed in Romania. Me and my partner went into Moldova. And it's kind of funny. I found out later, like part of the reason Adam invited me is he knew he could literally drop me and my partner at the Moldovan border and be like, figure it out. And I would.
Nice.
So we did. And we went, delivered, medical supplies and chocolate bars, actually went to a lot of the refugee camps and, hand out chocolate bars to little kids.
Yeah. Can we stop just on that little detail for a second? Because I did a lot of that in Bosnia as well. And I wish that more people could see how much of that the military does. As far as the humanitarian outreach part. I know it's fun chocolate bars to little kids or whatever, but there is a true human connection that you make with these people. And I think, so many.
Well, that's the winning the hearts and minds. And, it's funny because, look, I work with the far left psychedelic movement, and it's interesting their opinions on the military and veterans. They think it's still, draft era 1960s Vietnam and like
Full Metal Jacket.
And like the American military is just to kill people. And like, they forget that the U.S. military goes into Haiti, the U.S. military goes into Bosnia, the U.S. military, goes to Thailand after a typhoon, every earthquake, every natural disaster, the U.S. goes in and helps people. And that's a good thing. But I came back from the first trip, but when Adam called, I said, okay, so here's the deal. I don't have a problem doing this, but if there's a second trip, I want to go to Poland. And I told him why. He's like, total. So went, did the first trip. First trip went great. Came back, started planning the second trip. Went to Poland, ended up, and it's funny because when I was in Moldova, one of my good friends and colleagues that I work with, Liana, messaged me. She's like, "Are you over here?" I'm like, "Well, I'm in Moldova. I don't know where here is." Right? She's like, "I'm in Poland," and she's like, "Do you think you could coordinate volunteers?" I was like, as an NCO in the Marine Corps and the Army, that's kind of our job. Literally, that's an NCO's job, coordinate volunteering.
Yes.
And so she's like, hey, can you come help out? I'm like, yeah, I got to go back and like get my dog and find somebody to watch my dog. And so then I went to Poland, ended up in Medyka. Was supposed to be there for like 4 or 5 days, ended up staying for over a month. Went back and forth into Ukraine doing different humanitarian missions and supply runs. And that was funny because Turkish Air totally hosed me. They wanted like $4,000 for me to honor my ticket. And I'm like, hold on. I call Ramstein PAX terminal. I'm like, is Space A open again? Because this, there were still all these COVID restrictions.
Yes.
They're like, just opened up like 3 weeks ago.
Perfect.
I'm like, awesome. Yeah. So then I'm sitting here in Medyka, Poland. I'm like, now I got to get to Ramstein. Okay. So I grabbed my bags and hopped the train and hopped a plane and hopped another train and made my way across Europe. Went to Ramstein and ended up taking me about 3 days to get a flight back, but rode a C-17 back to and landed it in New Jersey, rented a car, and then drove back to DC. And then the third trip, I went over December 1st and I came back January 11th.
Okay.
So that was a much longer trip. And I actually kind of accidentally started getting involved with the psychedelic movement over there.
Tell us more about that. You mentioned you're speaking next or in a couple of weeks in Kyiv. Or
May 4th. Yeah.
May 4th. Yeah.
There's a psychedelic research conference in Kyiv.
So when you say research, is it in therapy type?
Yes.
Research. Okay.
Therapeutic for mental health.
Gotcha.
And so I ended up, while I was there, I talked to one of the largest Ukrainian veterans organizations about it. I was able to brief one of the largest military mental health hospitals, one of their entire therapeutic staff, met with some government officials and things like this. And then, actually rented a warehouse while I was there, set it up as a logistics hub, and then went down east.
How does that feel 9 years after your first therapy session to now be an ambassador, quite literally global?
It's very weird, but also, granted, this is an N of one, but the 4th of July before I went through the MDMA therapy, was living in South Carolina. I was in my closet, in my body armor with my service dog, having flashbacks of Iraq because of all the explosions. Right. And now I went down to the front lines between the Russians and the Ukrainians with artillery and small arms fire going on all around me. And I don't even flinch.
Gave you the tool permanently, maybe to maybe put things into categories, help you control maybe emotional responses that way. Right?
Yeah, but also, like, I knew I was safe where I was, like relatively safe at least. And so I was emotionally present. It doesn't mean I didn't see horrible shit over there and didn't cry. I just processed it. And when I came back, I picked up the phone, I called my therapist and had a few conversations. But in part because I was actually, one of the things that was an unknown quantity was, would I come back with new PTSD from Ukraine?
Sure.
But also, it was easier knowing that if that were the case, I'd be able to that there was there's MDMA assisted therapy that I could go through again and work on stuff. So that was helpful. But, one of the things for me personally is working on psychedelic policy and drug policy here in the US is so excruciatingly fucking slow.
Yeah.
It literally takes, I've been doing this for 6 years. We've made a lot of progress, but we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Seems like the PR game is going well, though. Is that accurate, or is that just the PR working?
Part of it is, if you're involved in this and know about it, most of the people in your life do too. So you end up being in an echo chamber.
Right.
About 2 years ago, there was a Harris X poll done, and it asked one simple question: do you believe psychedelics have the potential to help mental health? Yes or no? Yeah, 65% of the population said no, not even on potential.
Gotcha.
So, the thing, part of the thing that a lot of people, especially in policy, forget is the United States is more than San Francisco, DC, and New York. There's people in Iowa too. And, they need to understand to hear about this and learn that, okay, you know, if I break my leg and I go to the ER, they're probably going to give me morphine, but it's in a but it's in a medical environment, specially trained people, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fundamentally different than the guy shooting up heroin behind a 7-Eleven.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying the person shooting up heroin behind 7-Eleven shouldn't get help. I absolutely think they should, but those are two different things. And so, there's a lot more on the PR campaign, but like getting a bill passed takes years. And so being able to go over there and hand a family a box of food that'll feed them for a week, a lot of the places I was going into were formerly occupied territories, and the Russians weren't feeding them. These are people who were starving and eating rats. And the elderly would go into the forest and forage for mushrooms to pickle. And the Russians had mined the forest. So being able to go in with, clothing and food and medical supplies.
When it comes to clothing and food like that, is there anything or place that people over here can donate to that is sure to get to help like that, or even if it's just money?
Yeah, there's a few organizations, and I'll email you a list, but one of them is I work with an organization called United Refuge, and it's a very ingenious model that's very different, and the hope is that actually it can be replicated in other areas in the world. But if foreigners come in and do everything, well, then when the war's over, there's nothing left. And so the purpose of United Refuge is to work with local organizations who, because you have an entire country mobilized for work. There's people doing, humanitarian work that were in IT or they were insurance salesmen, and like, hey, it's a very interesting and eclectic group of people I hang out with over there from very, very different backgrounds. Like one of them actually is a drug counseling therapist.
Oh, wow.
So we actually had a lot of talk about this because he had never heard about it. And now actually he wants to get trained to be a psychedelic therapist.
Nice.
Most of what he works is people addicted to alcohol.
Right.
But he also does all this humanitarian work and has basically since 2014 been feeding people and all this stuff because we got invaded. So that's what they do now. So those are people who just got together and said, let's do it. And so what United Refuge does is we come in and we provide logistical support, strategic support. We also get them set up so that, we have access to supplies and things, but we want to set them up to be able to get plugged into INGOs and the UN and all this stuff on their own so they can stand on their own 2 feet. So the purpose of United Refuge is to fill that gap from a bunch of people that get together and are just paying out of pocket to help people and turn them into a full-fledged
build infrastructure on the ground, essentially.
Exactly.
Right? Teach people to do it.
And this way, when the war's over and people leave, those orgs still exist.
Still there. Right.
And so but it's so rewarding to be able to go over and to help. And, whether you agree with US policy, and we can debate how much we should spend and what weapons we should send or not send and things like this, but this is industrial warfare. They're leveling villages and there's people who live there. There's children.
Targeting of civilians, I find most disturbing.
And that's, I'll be honest,
that's what I saw in Gaza, because there was a lot of that during that, even though different conflict, obviously, but you saw a lot of that too. And just the remnants. What I was witness to was the human condition after that.
Right.
And that's, I think probably why you do a lot of work you do is because you've been exposed to that human condition as well.
Well, that's why one of the things I'm trying to do is set up psilocybin and ibogaine treatment centers in the Carpathians in Western Ukraine to start treating people now, civilians, veterans, as well as active duty, with the full knowledge that the active duty will likely, if they're healed, volunteer to return back to the front lines. And that's a very controversial thing when you're talking about the anti-war left, but yeah, they need it. And it's actually been fairly interesting. I've had quite a few people who are very anti-war their whole life, because of Vietnam and Iraq, Afghanistan, all the US conflicts. but now they see it just where they agree with.
This is not, we made it very clear from the get. This is not what we've experienced the past 40, 50 years in warfare, or as far as the cause.
Right. And so now they're like, oh, wait. And it is a change. It is a difference. And that's a good thing. I mean, unfortunately, we live in a horrible world and violence is required to defend.
Exactly.
And so we can, and that's where, just war theory comes, and that's kind of what they meant the whole time. They just didn't realize it until they saw where they agreed.
Right.
Yeah. And it has helped change a lot of minds on that, which has been a good thing. But it's kind of funny that like I work in drug policy and I have a side gig doing humanitarian support in Ukraine. And my side gig to my side gig is doing psychedelic policy in Ukraine.
Right.
It all just sort of happened.
That's great.
Have you
Felt it almost in, I hesitate to use this word, but since you really began the second part of your journey after the therapy and everything like that, have you felt it in a way of a calling almost to help others or to get the word out for if you can help that veteran with a name who doesn't take his life today?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a calling as much as a
That's
duty.
right. I hesitate. To
Yeah.
use it.
No, I feel I have an obligation and a duty because, in total, MDMA clinical trials through MAPS, round numbers, maybe 450 people have gone through it. Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions, Marcus and Amber, do tremendous work. They've had about 600 people go through it. Like, there's not a lot of people that have been able to heal or had access to this because I have, and I'm still here. I feel I have an obligation to fight that fight because others can't. It's part of the reason I knew before I went over that on my last trip, I was going down to the front line and I genuinely didn't know what was going to happen. But I also knew that if I went, it proves to myself and to DOD and to a lot of other people how, granted, it's just me. And I'm an anomaly. I get this, but if it can work for one person, it can work for more than one person.
And I would say that yours is a pretty extreme example of being able to go back.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you were over there for just a couple of weeks. I know where you were stationed and you can feel free to probably fill in the details a little bit more, but was it Mortar Alley or what was the name?
Mortar in Balad. And then my last trip, I was down like Sloviansk, Lyman, Bakhmut area.
And that you can go back to any front line after that. Speaks high.
It was very interesting, but also it's something I knew that it needed to be done. It's also something I would never ask anybody to do unless I was willing to do it myself. And interestingly enough, I've had quite a few veterans who, because it's not just that I went through the MDMA therapy. I'm also a combat veteran who has a skill set,
right?
That makes me less of a risk for me. And I know what I'm doing over there, et cetera. And so I've had a few other veterans who went through various psychedelic trials reach out to me and say, hey, when you go back, let me know. I want to go with you. As a matter of fact, I've been talking to Jesse Gould because he's going to be going over and speaking at the same conference. I'll be there in person.
Right on.
A lot of the people are like doing videos or Zoom calling in, but Jesse is my understanding from him is he's going over there. And I asked, do you want to go down east with me? He said, yeah. I said, bring body armor and a helmet. I go back and forth so much now. I just leave my body armor and shit there because that shit's heavy and traipsing that crap across the Atlantic's pain in the ass. How many people would this actually help? And those are different questions. And honestly, if you can have a conversation with somebody who is either reluctant or has never heard about this, and it goes from does this work to how do we make this happen?
Right.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Great. And you're seeing it?
Absolutely. And it's actually really fun. You see it when you're in meetings. And actually it was kind of interesting. A lot of the meetings I had in Ukraine, specifically with the veterans organization, they'd heard something about it, but they didn't know anything about it. And in the beginning, they're like, this won't work in Ukraine. We can't do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then during the 1 hour conversation, it shifted from this isn't right for Ukraine. This doesn't work, to, okay, this is the minister we need to talk to. This is how our legal structure works, and all these things. And, you know, it honestly puts a smile on my face,
That's awesome.
because a lot of this is education. And that's where, I rarely turn down media interviews and things like that. And I'll be honest, one of the things I'm hoping for is that we do get more veterans that go through this, that want to step up and speak. Any veterans listening to this, I will gladly help you learn how to do media and not be nervous and be able to talk about things, because I've got a ton of media hits and we need more stories. We need different stories. That also lets me step back and focus more on policy and less on media. Um, but it is for all the veterans that are in this space. It's difficult because all of us get reached out to, right?
Right.
And then you find out that the guy you talked to took his life,
Yeah.
and it takes an emotional toll. But that
Every
also,
time, too.
kind of hits the afterburners, and you fight harder.
Yeah. I've found the similar motivation, not as direct as your experience, obviously, but suicide has such a halo effect, and a lasting one that people keep with them. The people you leave behind that they keep with you. So,
And there's a statistic for every suicide, 130 people are affected. People
all
don't
of us
even
are
realize
touched
that.
by it.
Yeah.
Everyone. You've been incredibly generous with your time. I applaud your effort. My wife and I can speak for her in this one case because she knew I was meeting with you today. We thank you as veterans and as folks who have found healing in similar methods from those wounds that you tend to carry with you sometimes. And your story has been an inspiration. You are an inspiration, which is Jack, put this all together and asked us to find somebody that inspired us. You were the first one that came up on the list here. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate it. I have one last question for you. As a band, we're
Well,
getting
hold on.
together.
Before you ask that question, I do want to say this to you and your wife, as well as the other veterans who may hear this. You're far stronger than you will ever give yourself credit for, simply because you're still here.
Same to you. Same to you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. My final question is, band, music guy, obviously. What's your favorite band?
So I have, if we could go through my playlist afterwards.
Let's do that.
I have a really super eclectic mix of music, in part because it depends on what it's for.
Mm-hmm.
I view music a lot of times as the soundtrack to my life.
Yeah.
So it depends. So for example, when my dad died, My Chemical Romance, Black Parade was, and I still listen to it, but how that song starts, it helped me heal. Five for Fighting has a bunch of different songs that I listen to for motivation. Also, like, I listen to Symphony of the Devil from the Rolling Stones a lot of times on earbuds when I'm walking up to Capitol Hill. I've got all this weird like motivation music depending on what I'm going to do. A song currently that speaks to me a lot is it's actually a Five for Fighting song, 100 Years.
I'll have to check it out. I'm familiar with that one.
It's about, and basically it's, you've got 100 years on this planet. What are you going to make? It actually, like, Five for Fighting, they've got like 3 songs that I listen to in a row. World, which has a line, history starts, what kind of world do you want? History starts now. As a matter of fact, when Jack Bergman and Lou Correa founded the caucus, I was fortunate enough to be there for the press conference. And I walked up to Congressman Bergman, and what I said was, history starts now. And then Superman, because I know this song is probably about being a father, and I am a father. But there's a lot of things there. Like, I didn't expect to be in this role. I didn't expect any of this. It's very strange and uncomfortable a lot of the time. But
learn about music, even lyrics, regardless of the person that wrote them, is that what they mean. All that matters is what they mean to the listener. So,
but like when I want to go drive fast, I'll listen to like Rammstein or Pantera. So like I've got this giant full spectrum, I listen to every genre of music depending on, what it is.
Awesome.
It is kind of cool when you're rolling through freaking bomb crater roads in Ukraine and you're playing, Wagner's Flight of the Valkyries.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's just weird and fun. And then you've got this soundtrack.
Absolutely. John, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a real pleasure talking.
You too.
Thank you. How are we doing, Jack?
Thanks, John. That was beautiful, guys. Thanks so much, really.
I guess it's singing our praises.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. You did a great job.
Right on, man. Well, we'll follow up, I guess, here.
Yeah, your first interview.
My first interview, for sure.
Oh, brilliant. Well done. Let's make a hit song.
Man. Yeah, let's make it.
No worries. Yeah, for his soundtrack.
Exactly. Your next soundtrack is what.
Well, and that actually leads to a question I had, which is when the song's all done and stuff, how I would be able to get like use rights and stuff like that.
Yeah. We'll get all that ironed out
Perfect.
For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Jack.
guys.
I'll
Take
follow
care.
up on you, man. Thanks.
Have a great gig.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Distant worlds from a past life, they haunt me. Memories blurred from that time still find me. A shell of myself just trying to survive. Fiery skies celebrate tonight, but I'm locked up, trapped inside of my own mind, fucked up. Maybe it's time to leave it all behind and change my state of mind.
No longer feel the need to wear my armor along the way that it's been. And now I begin to see in colors, oh, that I've never seen. No longer feel the need to wear my armor along the way that it's been. And now I begin to see in colors, oh, that I've never seen. No longer feel the need to wear my armor along the way that it's been. And now I begin to see in colors, oh, that I've never seen. No longer feel the need to wear my armor along the way that it's been. And now I begin to see in colors.
Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the song and the episode. The song will be released next week. It will be available on all streaming platforms, but you can already pre-save. Please support the artists by following them on social media and adding the song to any playlists you have. This is a completely free show, and you've listened this far, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pay us back by clicking like and subscribe. And follow at Podsongs on social media platforms, or subscribe to the newsletter at podsongs.com for special updates. Or just tell the next person you see about this amazing show where musicians interview their idols and write a song about them. The songs are available for download from the Podsongs website as well, which pays a lot more than the 0.00 whatever we get from Spotify. You can also email me at jack@podsongs.com to give feedback, suggest an artist and guest combos you'd like to hear, or just say hello. We're a listener-supported show, and I'd love to hear from you. A final thanks to my researchers, Dori Verbo and Rosa Marino, my producer, Maurizio Sanicola of Goldmine Records, and musicians Massimino Vozza and Luigi Falcione. The next episode will be out soon. In the meantime, you can listen to more amazing episodes in the archives. Until then, have a great day.